In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King. Tonight on America in Black and White, we honor a man whose life's work stands at the intersection of education, leadership, and generational transformation. In a world where our young people are too often underestimated, he has spent nearly 4 decades proving what is possible when you build systems that believe in them, invest in them, and prepare them for the world they deserve. From Patterson to Springfield, from Hartford to Boston, from the classroom to the superintendent's office, Kevin McCaskill has lived a journey that reflects discipline, resilience, and a relentless commitment to excellence. He is a builder of schools, of programs, of pathways, of people, and his impact stretches far beyond test scores or graduation rates. His work has shaped futures, strengthened communities, and redefined what career and technical education can be for Black and Brown students across this country. Tonight, we explore the story behind the leader, the educator, the coach, the mentor, the visionary, and the man who continues to push the boundaries of what public education can achieve. This is America in Black and White, and this is the conversation we've been waiting to have. Let's bring Kevin McCaskill to the stage, please. Hello, sir.
How are you this evening, sir?
I am just excellent. What about yourself?
Doing well up here in New England.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for being with us, and I'm glad that you could take the time to be with us and help us to continuously build our communities when it comes to education. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we get going?
Well, first and foremost, I am greatly appreciative of this opportunity, and I thank you for having me on the program this evening, and look forward to our conversation this evening.
Yes, sir. So I want to get started here, where I like to, where we could get the opportunity to learn who Kevin was before Kevin became who he is today. Can you tell us, growing up in Patterson, New Jersey, what experiences shaped your early understanding of education and opportunity?
Well, I would definitely say my mother and my grandmother, because they made it a point that school was important. And grew up with a single mom who worked double shifts as a nurse, and a grandmother that worked as a domestic. Work ethic was in our family bone, our DNA, and they made to it that I was going to be the one hanging out in the corners and using a term that my grandmother used. I wasn't going to be no hoodlum walking around the streets of Patterson. So they really put a strict emphasis on achievement, reading and writing, all those things associated with school. So I knew from an early age what was important.
So, how did attending Patterson Public Schools influence your identity and leadership style?
Well, Patterson was, a different place. It was a school system in a state of flux. It seemed like every single year. And I went to school in the 60s and the 70s. And,
Mhm.
we had 40 some odd students in the classroom of varying degrees. And it wasn't where a lot of lessons were differentiated. Either you got it or you didn't. And if you didn't, there was a course of action that was taken for you. And I see you smiling, say how you can understand where I'm coming from with that. But it was really a sink or swim situation. It was so unfortunate back then because a few of friends of mine who didn't make it, And obviously they turned to other types of activity that didn't lead them to positive outcomes. But that was growing up. It's a tough city, Patterson, and you grow up in surroundings that can be sometimes difficult. People of not great means, and so you learn a lot on the street. You learn a lot by the folks in your neighborhood. You learn where to go and where not to go, and who to talk to and who not to talk to. But you learn a lot of life lessons about navigating life and understanding those terms of adaptability and resiliency and all those terms that people use today. We were living that back then. So I'm so thankful for the way I was raised in Patterson and the lessons that it taught me to get me to this point today.
Can you tell us what are some of those lessons that you learned?
Being tough, not being afraid, in essence, not getting, as you know, Charles, not getting punked out when you're trying to get something done, and really holding your own, and really holding your own. And I'm not just talking fists and everything else. I'm talking about with your mind and everything else. But it also taught you that grit, that work ethic, that grind, always staying on your grind to be successful. And those are the things that are characteristics of Patterson that I hold true today, where everybody who was worth something, they was always on that grind, working hard to keep it moving, no matter what the obstacles have to obstacles, obstacles that may be from a positive, obstacles for not having other in your life for stretches of time, but someone having role models and seeking out role models, utilizing sports as an avenue and a vehicle to get out your certain circumstances. So it really taught me that just can go on and on. I know you got a lot more, but it was really those early life lessons about learning how to move into here.
As you think about those life lessons though, and think about, let's transcend that, let's compare that to today's times. Do you feel like you in those life lessons had the ability and learned what it was to critically think compared to having to teach a lot of that to the kids today?
In life, it really did, and that's a great question. And I think just when you have to learn how to maneuver and navigate, you're automatically critically thinking. You are problem solving, and in some instances, you're problem solving on the spot. And I'll give you a great example. Walking home from school, Charles, and you got to make a business decision about going to a certain neighborhood where there's some tension. And so, you learn observations, situational awareness, which is great. And you're sitting there seeking, well, if I go this way, I can avoid all this. Then you know what? I know I can outrun a whole bunch of folks if I get a good running start. And so you start making, so you start getting those thoughts in your mind, but you're actually you're calculating, thinking, from solving all at once, all within seconds. And that's just a small example, but those are some of the things that growing up in Patterson taught me.
So, what role did your family play in your development as a student and leader?
And I didn't hear that last question, Charles, breaking up a little bit.
Okay, what role did your family play in your development as a student and leader?
Oh, support. I mean, they always believed in my abilities to be successful in school, but they demanded that, and it was really go to school, as my grandmother say, be mannerable, behave yourself, make sure that the McCaskill name is ours and it's on your back, and so make sure that people know that you've been raised right. And so those are some of the things that you learn very quickly about that. But it was a level of expectations, high expectations, not a lot of excuses. My mother and my grandmother did not they didn't accept excuses of why I couldn't be successful. And it resonates with me today, where minimizing all the obstacles doesn't matter. It's about getting things done and getting them done the right way. And so important role my entire life, as well as my uncle, who was a pivotal person in my life as well. He was that male role model who really came out and got me to the point really interested to grow my love of mathematics and statistics and this stuff, because he's a computer scientist, one of the first Black computer scientists that I had ever met. But he was really intriguing to talk to, and really, again, emphasize excellence in the classroom, emphasize excellence on behaving yourself in a certain manner to really have folks would listen to you. He was really active in athletics, which is something that he really pushed me with as well.
So, when did you first realize you wanted to become an educator?
I think by mistake. I was working. I was working at Mass Mutual, fortunately, in Springfield. Right after graduation, and working in the group in the part, and I realized that corporate America really was like young necessity, because I had also had jobs in recreation, and I just quickly found out that those cubicles kind of box you in a little bit. And I said, that's not me. And so I stayed there about 3 years. But then Mass Mutual had this program with the Springfield Public Schools where they would want us to tutor. They said the employees would give you maybe 1 or 2 half days and pay you for it, and you can go and tutor in one of the local schools. I think I was the first person running in line just to get that afternoon off and get paid. But when I went to Classical High School, the old Classical High School in Springfield, to tutor those first cohorts of students, Charles, I just fell in love with the opportunity to help young people. And I said, you know what? I think I might want to teach. And I think I did that for a few months. And I think in May of 1988, I actually applied to be a teacher in Springfield Public Schools. I think a week later they hired me, and I started that August. And let me tell you, it's the best career move that I've ever made. I haven't looked back since.
Wow. Now that's fascinating, because I think sometimes when a lot of us get caught in corporate America, it kind of like washes the brain a little bit, and you find yourself, as you were saying, when those walls are closing in, and you got, all of these other different things that's happening, and it's like you're thinking totally different. And so when you get to that point of wanting to make that decision, then you kind of like make it like how you did. But a lot of people really don't think of what's that next thing. So when you did that to actually get into the public
That's right.
school system to teach, what was the that final nail that said, this is what I'm gonna do?
I think that first day when those students start coming into that classroom and you just see them, and Charles, they look like me. These kids look like me.
Right.
And when I felt that I had something to offer them, and they looked at me in a strange way, because I think I was the first Black teacher they had, someone they ever had. But it was amazing where all of a sudden I felt this sense of, you know what, all eyes are going to be on you every day, and how you comport yourself will determine the outcomes for these young people going forward, not just for your individual math class, but then being successful after that. And just to hear and to feel, and I think we just hit the ground running. And it was amazing the relationships that you build with your students, and it's second to none. I think you got to be, and people who work with young people, I think, can understand that. It's created very early things, being a former math teacher. Everybody hate math. So how many people hate math? Everybody hand in every class go up. And a goal of mine was saying, well, at the end of the year, when we do this, guarantee you somebody hate math, but you won't hate it, but it's in it. And it's amazing how you can just transform a group of 150 to 175 students to see how math is so relevant in their lives, and how it connects every piece of their life going forward. And not just for a test or anything else, that you can utilize to benefit you and your family for years to come.
How did your transition from Patterson to Willingboro impact your worldview?
Well, it's a change of family dynamic. My mother got married, and Willingboro was a suburban environment, and it was the first home. It was a home. You're living in a home. You're not living in a three family tenement building, 3 family tenement house. So yeah, had a little yard out in front and all that, all the good things. The air seemed a little fresher. There were the trees all over the place. So yeah, it was a real transition. I couldn't sleep for the first 3 or 4 weeks because it was too quiet. But it was a transition into a real diverse, truly a diverse community, Willingboro, where I lived in Patterson. I mean, we're predominantly black. I mean, it's a good, and you had some families. But going to Willingboro, you saw for the first. I was seeing a lot of interracial families, which was again kind of new. But it was just great seeing just a different slice of life. And not only was I lived there. I went to Willingboro High for 2 years. But it was something that was different and unique, and it was something that really helped me. That there's a brave new world out there outside the world of Patterson, and it was a great experience because it really helped me going on into college.
Also, so with that change of environment, what did that environment change do for you mentally and physically?
But I was like, well, if you say physically, I actually started growing a little bit. I think I went from 5'4" to 5'10". I think I went from 5'4" to about 5'10", and, and so that someone's that air, that water down there in South Jersey. But it was being around different people, different types of people. It was really and it was really fascinating to have that. And it was a school that was a lot more than the schools that I went to. Wow, these schools aren't falling apart. These and ceiling tiles are actually still in. And it was just a different feel and dynamic where tension you were able. I mean, it seemed like you were just free. And just feeling sure of always look, circumspectly every single day. People were allowed themselves, and it was just a fantastic community to grow up in. And once again, I only really lived down there for the 2 years, my junior and senior year. I think I was fortunate also that my aunt and uncle lived in the community prior, so I'd go down and visit them, and for a couple of weeks on end, but nothing to the point in there. But Willingboro was a real special place as well.
What challenges did you face as a young black man pursuing higher education in mathematics?
Well, the one many of us in the business when you talk mathematicians and black scientists on, and I just had I just numbers and so always trying to seek out who's doing that and not to find someone that really shared that. Again, I was fortunate that my uncle was really, again, very analytical, very calculating, being in computer science. But outside of that, there wasn't really anyone else. And so when you're talking to other people about what they're doing, and I know one of the things when I was heading on to college, and the first thing they ask, what do you want to major, what are you going to major in? And, either English or PE or something like that. I said, no, mathematics. And and everybody would just short circuit. And I found it interesting. I found it funny, but most importantly, it was motivating as well. Make sure that I should get that degree in mathematics. Stigma that we're not entertainers. We're more folks that can be athletically gifted. That we are analytical. We do think critically. We can problem solve all types of STEM fields. So that was a motivation, and this was something I started school all the way through college and into my career as well.
Who were the mentors who helped guide you early in your early academic journey?
Once again, Charles, you broke a little bit.
Who were the mentors who helped guide your early academic journey?
One of the mentors I would say early to really make the transition to the public schools was Bishop Dr. Bryant Robinson, who was not only was he a local clergyman in Springfield, but he was also, at the time, deputy superintendent and interim superintendent in Springfield Public Schools. And he played just a vital role in one, getting me into the field of education, but always keeping my mind about this is about presence, but it's also about making sure you are a role model for others to follow you. And he really took an interest in me even before I got into the field of education. And it was great to have someone push you to know a lush career in the city of, and to have him really mentor me through the years that I was in Springfield and even without. I couldn't ask for a better. I couldn't ask for a better man. And God first and foremost, but he was a man who believed in education. He really believed in the power of education to transform lives. And that, again, resonated in my heart that if he can do this for X number, nearly 4 decades as well, and at some point in time, mantle has to grab that mantle and move forward and just make sure that we can also, then I can continue his legacy of uplifting, especially Black male educators to heights that no one has ever seen.
What personal values carried you through college and into your career?
Well, college, it was a matter, I think it was more or less, this college is not going to defeat me from not graduating. And especially when, and I went to a predominantly white institution in which the history that a lot of Black students didn't fare well, where, again, they would either transfer out or just would not finish. And, what helped me a great deal was that motivating factor where I'm not going to be one of those individuals. Again, I played basketball as well, which helped greatly. A mathematics major, sitting there with all white folks around me, and I said, "No, this is going to happen. That's going to be my motivation. I'm not going to be the one that walks away from this." So it was always that from my freshman year to my senior year. That was always a driving force that I'm going to make it, and I'm just as good. I'm just as good as all my classmates, if not better. And that's something that I had to not only prove to prove that to myself, but I think by just sticking it out and getting it done, it really opened the eyes of quite a few folks.
So, how did your athletic background shape your discipline and leadership?
Well, if you want to be anywhere, if you want to be decent in anything, you got to work hard. And again, I go back to earlier on in our conversation about work ethic, and that's something I knew of very early in life. And so with sports, again, discipline, character, resilience, hard, you got to suffer a little pain in order to be good. And I've been fortunate to have some really good coaches that really put that as an emphasis. And being tapped as a captain, in both in high school and as well as college, where people are looking for you for strength. They're looking for you for guidance, but most importantly, for you to always be in control in the worst of times. And I think that's just those opportunities of leadership early on that coaches had enough faith in my ability and the character that I possessed to name me captain. I think really and again help build the demand that day.
So, during your sports days, can you tell us what was the importance of teamwork and developing a team? Because I think when you have a great team around you, it makes everyone better. How did that work for you?
Well, I tell you, it's something where, and if I can go with athletics do a lot about teamwork. And as corny and cliche-ish as it sounds, important. How do you get to be on the same page? And despite the best laid plans may suddenly go awry, awry, how do you, as a leader, get it back on the rails? And that was something, again, in athletics taught me that. And it's really paid dividends up until today. And when you have large, complex schools such as Brockton High School, we have over 3,500 students. It's a complex system. Lessons in life about forming relationships and teamwork and understanding, and where one thing I would never ask anyone to do something that I wasn't willing to do or willing to sacrifice. And when folks see that, the more, because they know you're not going to lead them down a road of perdition. And that's how I pretty much start to develop leadership. And I'm still growing in leadership, 30 plus years of being in it, I'm still growing. But going back to those formative years of athletics and being a leader, and understand, going back to my years of teaching when I was a team leader of our little cohort of 8th grade teachers, it really started building those building blocks, solidifying those building blocks for where I am today as leader of Brockton.
So, what lessons from coaching basketball translated directly into school leadership?
Boy, sometimes the best laid plans they go awry, and it teaches you how to adapt, transition, and really stay committed to a system that you feel that can work. But it also teaches you, again, how do you put the right people in the right places at the right times to move the needle for success. And that's what coaching, because coaching, as you know, it's second by second. Things change in a heartbeat, and you have to pivot at certain times, and sometimes that pivot comes within seconds. And so really understanding how fast your mind can work to adapt to a certain situation has really helped me tremendously with the thinking process when something comes up in school, where you're automatically going into options and abilities to pivot, and how should we pivot? What's going to be that next move, and not just the next move, what would be the next? If I make this move, what are some of the consequences that can occur? And all these processes are happening within seconds. And I think coaching, that's what it's all about. Thinking that great, grander, obviously, such, but has real leadership.
Let's transition over to you. Let's delve a little bit deeper into you becoming an educator. Um, what drew you to middle school mathematics as your entry point into education?
Going in and making that transition from corporate and private industry into the public schools. First I had to convince my wife that why we had to take that pay cut first and foremost to do this. So that was an interesting conversation to begin with. But when you're
Oh,
going
I
in,
bet.
but going in and understanding that I felt good about it, but understanding the impact, not the effect, but the impact that you could have on young people. That's what I wanted to really experience. And that I thought and I still do, I have something to offer them, and offer them with someone that looks just like them, who's grew up in the same neighborhoods that they grew up in. And here it is. And I used to come to, and I'm going back to the 80s with a shirt and tie every day. That's something I didn't see every day. And so you start changing the narrative of what it looked like to be a teacher, and a black teacher, and a black role model. And I take that role model role extremely serious, even up until this conversation now. And it's something in which I really want to put myself in the best light so they can see the light. I always want that to happen with our young people. And so coming in, I knew that, math was going to be it, but I knew that there were bigger lessons to learn about responsibility, really taking your proper stance in society, being bold, but not being belligerent, having in essence where you always walk with your head up and your shoulders back, that you were confident in who you were and in the skin that you were in. So it was just much more bigger than mathematics. And I think in the 6 years, I only taught for 6 years, but that was the goal. And I think our mission was accomplished.
So in the beginning, and as we think about, just growing up, and you're doing middle school, and these kids are going through the growing pains because they're growing and minds are all over the place. How were you able to navigate that in order to start that process to transcend and grow like it has?
I'd say, it's something when you look at young people through the lens of what first and foremost, understanding that they are not adults. Understand that their frontal lobes are that they're going to say things flip at times, but knowing that there's a higher plane that you can to see that light come. Trust me, when you see that light come on with young people, it is as exciting as you can ever imagine, and not just see it in one, but to see it in a class where when they start to get it, and then they began to really understand. I'm actually smart, and I can do things, and I can actually articulate things, and I can show people. I mean, that's the point that when in education, you can't put a price tag on that feeling. And that's where, I think the thrill of teaching is when you get those aha and those light bulb moments where it just resonates within large groups of students and they get it. And that's why you see, people who've taught for over 30, nearly 40 years. They love that buzz that you get. And it's not just a pat on the back. It's the satisfaction of lifting up young people.
So, what did those first 6 years in the classroom teach you about students, learning, and yourself?
Repeat that one more time, Charles.
Okay. What did those first 6 years in the classroom teach you about the students, learning, and yourself?
What it taught me a lot about resiliency when some lesson plans didn't work. You got to
I can imagine.
But
I can imagine.
But I think with the learn for me with the students is the proof was in the pudding again with our state testing, because we the students that I received, I was fortunate that our students were always testing above grade level, which was fabulous. But the learning piece is that it just wasn't from out of a book. It was something that you can really connecting mathematics to every sector of their life. Really interesting, so they could actually see the beauty part of the why this is important, as opposed to just getting a grade or just knowing how to disconnect. Something as simple as teaching students how to discount sales, utilize sales discounts in their head, the mental math pieces. They were amazed that they could actually do it. And I said, think about it. You could probably get the number faster than they can ring it up on a register. Things where students really start to thinking in that critical mind going. And it was just fascinating to me that they could start getting an appreciation of a subject matter that not only was a mandate, but this mandate transcended the classroom. And as a learner, I learned from them. I learned how to read when to hold, when to pull or push the the accelerator, but then when to rein myself back in to saying we're going a little bit too fast. Let's slow the pace down and let's see how much, because they're not getting it. It really taught me how to read a room quickly. And I know, I got better as I went along.
Wow, I gotta say, the thing that I am always proud of and really makes me happy is that when I have the you know, you like and other black men that are educators that have been here on the show, it's like you guys are really making a difference in these classrooms. But it's just so it's crazy that, you know, people don't have the opportunity to know just the impact that you're having in that classroom,
Right.
and how you're actually changing the whole game of education, you know?
Oh, yes, indeed. You said a mouthful right there, Charles. You said a
Yeah.
mouthful.
Yeah. So how did your approach building relationships with students in Springfield? How did you approach? I'm sorry. How did you approach building relationships with students in Springfield?
You know, I think one of the advantages that I had, and I might have said it previously, I used to work for the Park and Rec department part time at night. So we had an open gym, and so you're dealing with young people in a different manner. And so I really just building those types of relationships, and I was coaching at the time, and a few of the kids would know. So that there was a common interest, and really learning how to gauge students, see what motivated them, see what motivated them. Why are you? It's 0 degrees out here, and you coming into the gym with no coat on. What's going on? You must want to really love basketball, or something else is going on. But it's really started to have these conversations with young people and see how they tick. And that was part of, you know, they were from different households. They were from different socioeconomic situations. They had certain dislikes, and really getting to know them. And then pieces when we talk music. McCaskill likes rap music too. Now, McCaskill don't go overboard with that stuff that go overboard, but I like that too. So when you look at common,
Yes.
yeah, food is another. So I eat too. So you really get to know what the student is all about, and so those are things that just building relationships, and always being a listener, which is crucial.
Right.
Always being a listener.
So, what were the biggest challenges facing urban schools when you began teaching?
I think so. One of the things is just one, attendance coming on a regular basis. Just with the initiative that we're talking about, but also I think student apathy about, well, this stuff isn't important. And one of the pieces that I really incorporated during teaching history, especially when it comes understanding that they're in those seats because someone died to get in those seats. People sacrifice their bodies and their lives to be sitting in those seats. And that's something, Charles, that we've forgotten today. And I think that has to be revisited in our urban. And I think once our students realize that someone sacrificed for me to have this seat, I owe it to them. I owe it because that could have been my uncle, my great grandfather, my grandfather doing these things. So really putting it into the context of history of Black folks, saying, look, you really need to understand why you were sitting in that seat, getting a free education of others that don't look like you. And and I really had our 8th graders really to understand that. And that really transcended every stop I've gone, because I can't forget, the Rock Nine. I can't forget those things. I forget those building schools for Black folks. So these things in which keep them historical. It appeared, I think the students, they were getting it and understanding they have a moral responsibility to their ancestors,
Mhm.
responsibility to their ancestors. the heritage educators going forward a lot for them to states.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello? Kevin, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I think my connection a little bit. Yep, you're coming back in. Yep.
Okay. Um, how did you navigate the transition from teacher to assistant principal?
Different world. Different world. And you're no longer the classroom teacher. Now it's in your little sector of your room. Now it's more global. Now it's more global. And one of the, going back in the early 90s when I started as an assistant principal, it was all about discipline, 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 and more discipline. And I was fortunate again to have mentors such as Dr. Robinson and a few others, that it's not just about discipline, it's about understanding, similar in the classroom, students understanding their responsibilities. And that responsibilities are being the best version of yourselves at all times, understanding your responsibilities as a student, and understand that you are representing your families as well going forward. And so it's really, once again, carrying myself as a role model, suit and tie every single day, suit and tie every day, just like I am now, and really speaking and not talking at students, but really talking to students, talking to parents. But the biggest issue was, boy, and we had some rough teachers, because if something happened, they pretty much want the student to go in the guillotine and come back, as opposed to saying, they got to come back to class at some point in time. But it was really a great transition because I had, great people around me. And I think when you have great people around you that really believe in your abilities, that transition was as seamless as I can possibly get it. And I really enjoyed that time. And I was at two different schools. I was at when I moved to my first assistant principal's position, I went to another school. But then I was fortunate to come back to my school in which I taught. That was a different dynamic, because now you leave as a teacher, but you're coming back as somebody's boss.
Right,
A dynamic, trying to, working through that dynamic. But I think understanding, when everyone understands and when you communicate, I'm not here to be your boss. I'm here to be a support for you. And that's just having a great mentor. My great mentor principal, Carol Fazio, who was just unbelievable as a mentor. She was just the master of that. And I think having great mentors in your life helps a lot with that transition. And once again, I consider myself extremely fortunate to have those folks in my life.
So, what leadership lessons did you learn during your 8 years as an AP?
Accountability. One was accountability to all constituents. That's to, obviously, to the staff, that's to students, as well as parents in the community, making sure that we are responsible for the outcomes of these young people. And so there are certain things, when from a discipline perspective, when we had to adhere to certain policies and administer discipline to students, that it was fair and just. But most importantly, we had to go into those classrooms to make sure that lessons were tight, making sure students are learning, and offer supports to teachers in order to maximize student outcomes. Those were just as important. It was just as important really reaching out to parents, and not just to call to indicate that we needed them to come in for a hearing for a suspension, but hey, your son is turning it around, making sure that we had those total lines of communication, both for the good, the and the not so good. So really creating those trusting relationships. And I want to put an emphasis on those trusting relationships, because they went across the board with students, because students might have not liked what you have did, like for the consequence they would give. given, but the parent the same way. Why they understood why. That reason for the staff that we were always looking out for students' best interests. And those are some of the leadership pieces that we as business, not just for outcomes on test scores, we want to create dynamic learning environments in which everyone grows, everyone prospers, and each teach one. And we're here as a support network for each and every person in our community.
Wow. You know, I really like that, and I think that teaches stability, and that also teaches what it is to make sure that you're not able to do it unless you know what you're doing. I can you is that something that
Absolutely.
you brought along with you from your early childhood as what your grandparents and your mother and father was teaching you? Because this is like when you say they told you, you're representing them with that name, so they're representing you with this knowledge.
I tell you, it's something that I go back to my grandmother and my mother. I mean, strong women. And it's something when you're trying to raise a knucklehead young man who sometimes doesn't listen all the time, but they made it a point that they never gave up on me. They never gave up on me. But again, there's the lessons of character, being responsible, being mindful of always being mindful of other people. That was a big thing, being mindful of other people as well. And those are ingrained in me. They were ingrained in me from an early age. And I'm ever so thankful for both of them.
So, what made you effective in supporting teachers and improving instructions?
Being able to look at things and say, did you try this? Is this a possibility? Always being strategizing and sitting down, and I always say, and also listening as well, really offering solution as opposed to, well, that's not getting done, that's not getting done, you do this. Stretch educators to say, well, how about comfort zone a little bit and try something here that's more collaborative, a learning strategy, and maybe really loosen up the reins on the instruction where have students do some of this in the cooperative group, in the small learning groups, in groups of 4, groups of 3, whatever it may be. And I think really when they start seeing that students, especially middle school students, they got to move them sitting for the time, something gonna happen. Something gonna happen. But we constructively activities that really allow a lot of kinetics, a lot of movement. I think really having them understand how to classes. If 50% of your students aren't passing in the assessment about what they have learned. So how do you segments? What particular really learn how to disaggregate pieces? What pieces within that math lesson are they not getting? What concepts? And if they're not getting, how can you think about how you teach that particular piece? And so really scrutinize their own strategies as opposed to just saying that's wrong, you need to do this, but really get them to the realization, how do I really self-observe my own work, and how do I readjust my work in order for students to gain mastery over it? And so it's really working with the educators and supporting the educators as opposed to just being the supervisor and telling them what to do.
So, how did you balance discipline, culture, and academic expectations?
I think you align them. I think they have to be aligned. And one, if you're not, if you're disruptive, you're not learning. Coming in, and I still do it to today. If students are coming in on a discipline for a disciplinary matter, I look at their grades. So here you're acting this way, but yet I'm looking at grades that are this. What's going on? I said because at some point and again, I like to send it from school to real world. I said, do you think if you're working in a job or a career, and I don't like using the word job, I like using the word career, in a career that's willing to pay you six figures, and you're acting in a certain way, and you have these expectations, how long do you think you're going to be employed? And they'll say, not at all. I said, well, the same. So you're learning that lesson now, so you will be prepared to make those six figures and continuously make six figures until you stop working. So if we learn these habits, stop disrupting class because it's not now affecting you. Imagine your student, your peers in the, they're not being productive either. So in essence, it's a selfish act. And students begin to internalize that wow, my behavior is not just me, but how the effect that it has on everyone in that classroom, including the teacher. We get to really align those that everything that you're doing, if you're being disrespectful, how that transcends that's not an employable skill. That doesn't keep you gainfully employed for a long period of time. Just don't do the work. Once again, being employed. Because one, that means you're not growing and you're not producing. Especially high school students really get it. But they really get to grasp their responsibilities. And so even though let's say we have a situation where we have to remove students, well, we've got to, you're gonna be suspended. But when you come back, we gonna welcome you with open because it's fresh start. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And this is the time for you to make mistakes. But by hoping that you'll learn that you can't fight people in your career. You can't fight people in the office. You can't tell your boss where they can go. Can't do those things.
Right.
Learn these right in high school. High school, we gonna learn that right here. So once that you're able to feed your family and family for many, many a decade, and when you can meld, discipline as well, look forward what their behaviors now, habits that they create can either be an attribute for them going forward or it can be a detriment to them going forward.
So, what do you believe makes a great school leader?
Oof. If you ask 100 school leaders that question, you might get some commonality. But I think someone who is very visible, very approachable, enthusiastic and passionate about the position itself, who is always willing to in a position to support, is an exhorter, is always upbeat, even despite the times where it's not for a facade, but you're always looking for a way better, always looking for a way better, but always understanding the power of education and preaching the power of education. And it's something that it's like your aura and everyone sees it. And I think leaders who are really great listeners, because one of the things I've come to, in my 38 years of doing this, I do not have all the answers and I do have blind spots. And when those blind spots are exposed, I have to swallow a lot of surprise and say, yeah, you know what? You are correct. Understanding that you can be wrong and living with that. And that doesn't diminish you as the leader. It makes you someone who's growing. And that's one thing I've always wanted to say. I always want to be in a position at age 64 and 38 years in here. I'm still growing. I have not made it yet. And I think when you have that mindset and you always have this can-do attitude, people just get excited about the possibilities of moving forward. And once again, I've been fortunate to be in positions in which that's always been the case. And then even in my current position here, where they're seeing the possibilities of just becoming this dynamic learning environment here in Brockton, and people are just jumping on board. But really, and also being very knowledgeable about quite a few things, not just with leadership, but again, across the board, just understanding trends in education, really literally all over the country. If they're doing something exciting, get about, find great partners within the community, partners within the private sector, because once again, these are the individuals who will, at some point in time, may hire your students. So really, really have a total engagement and commitment to your school community.
So, what moments from your early career still guide your decisions today?
It sounds, and I always use this when I hear that term, all students can learn. I say, I go beyond that. All students have possibilities of greatness and success. Some of it's delayed, but there's something within every single student, and I hold firm to that. I hold firm to it, that there is something within every student, and we've got to find it, and we've got to tap into it. And so many times with Black and brown students, we're not investing enough to tap into it, to find that connective tissue for them. And that's something that's been a trek for me for 38 years, that I will continue to look at tapping into. What can we do to turn on that light and turn on that generator within them to get them excited about something? If it's a subject, if it's a club, if it's something that really puts a light in their life. And that's a journey, and sometimes it takes some excavation to get to it with some of our students. But I think it's worth the dig. I think it's worth the dig.
So, let's talk about your leadership across multiple schools. What was your vision when you became principal of DeBerry Elementary?
Well, I was replacing a legend, a woman by the name of Barbara Jefferson, who had been there for 30 plus years, and she was a pillar to the community. And I think the key part of transitioning from her to me was me and her we were colleagues, and she really helped me greatly transition to that role. And for me, it was new. I was coming from middle school to elementary school, but when it was a K through 5 school, and in the heart of the neighborhood, in the heart of the neighborhood, and it's something where once again, it's all about presence and suit and tie every single day, and making sure that I was that role model that these young people saw every single day. And one thing I told the staff is that, in middle school, we don't teach students how to read in middle school. So you're going to show me and Charles, I got a lesson in the 2 years I was there. It was remarkable to see how students learn how to read. And that really set the impetus for me understanding the value of education, patience in education, strategies, differentiated learning. That laid the framework of all those pieces for me to move forward. And I see that I needed that 2 years. I needed that 2 years in elementary school to get to the believe it or not, to get to the high school level, become a better leader.
So, how did you approach leading in elementary school after years in secondary education?
Different, because once again, you're learning the true foundation of learning, and the importance of great teaching. And I was fortunate that we had great elementary school. That every day, one thing you learn about young kids, every day is a new day. They might have been spilling paint and knocking over stuff the one day, and they came to school as if nothing happened the next day. As I wish I could have that feeling every day with our high school kids. But it was a new day every day, and that really, they see the world through just a different lens. They don't harbor ill will. They don't harbor mistakes that were made. McCaskill, here for another day of school. And so it was a way of mentality that I think